The original idea was come here to the Amazon. This place has got the highest biodiversity on the planet. We're dropping from 14,000 feet, way up in the cloud forest, down through 8 different ecozones into the jungle, which goes all the way out to the Amazon for thousands of kilometers. And it has the highest per square kilometer biodiversity of plants and animals, flora and fauna, than anywhere else on the planet, period. So that's a biological hotspot, right? But it also has a cultural diversity that is absolutely spectacular. You've got mountain people, the Keros, the Quechua, and then you've got the Keros down living in the jungle. You've got what they call people that have never had contact. Nobody's ever contacted them in terms of the civilized world of helicopters and planes and trucks and TVs and all. They've never seen any of that, and they don't want contact. And if we do contact them, they will die of diseases almost instantly. Immediately, half of them will die of a disease. So the government has set those areas aside and said, okay, no, non-contact people there. Biodiversity extremely important. Let's try and preserve this area. But it's not simple, because the bottom line is that you have all these global pressures, economic pressures, of mining, logging, interoceanic highways. All these things are putting pressure on this area, and we're having to think our way out of this one, in a different way than business as usual.
¿No? Es uno de los ecosistemas más frágiles que existen en todo el planeta, ¿no? La biodiversidad es bastante grande. En este caso nos encontramos en el bosque de nubes del territorio denominado Huayquecha, ¿no? Colinda con el Parque Nacional del Manu, una de las áreas naturales protegidas más importantes del Perú, ¿no? Es un parque nacional que tiene más de 1.800.000 hectáreas y que integra desde las zonas de 4.000 metros hasta la llanura amazónica, que son más o menos 100 o 200 metros, ¿no? En este caso estamos alrededor de los 2.900 metros de altitud. Y como te digo, esto es uno de los ecosistemas más frágiles que tiene el Perú en los bosques de montaña, ¿no? Como tú podrás ver, la configuración y la vegetación muy espesa y la fisiografía tan accidentada hace justamente que esta biodiversidad tan importante, tan interesante, en un espacio muy pequeño, ¿no? Encuentres muchos hábitats, tanto de flora como de fauna, ¿no? La importancia de conservar este tipo de bosques es principalmente contra las quemas, ¿no? Los agricultores que viven alrededor, como las comunidades campesinas, están acostumbrados cada año a hacer quemas para incrementar sus chacras.
It's a really interesting challenge working here, because you've got this global issue of conservation and biodiversity, which is clearly, this is a critical place for the planet. And then you've got all the local people who've been living here forever, and they want to be able to maintain their culture, but also they aspire to have better education, better future for their children, all those things that anybody on the planet wants to be able to do. And so we got involved with an amazing group called the Amazon Conservation Association. The Amazon Conservation Association is a group that has largely been working on these global issues, but recently also trying to tackle how can people live sustainably in these local areas while also contributing to the solutions that we are seeking on a global scale.
The Amazon Conservation Association is a Peruvian NGO that looks forward to protecting biodiversity. How do we do this? By doing scientific research and applied research. But at the same time, we look forward to the development of a network of protected areas. They use a new legal tool that's called a conservation concession. So we're looking towards the development of private lands, communal lands, regional lands that will adopt this legal tool. The Amazon Conservation Association is trying to implement 2 conservation concessions in Cusco, all along the Queros River. Now this area is inhabited by the Queros Nation in the Andes, and in the lowlands we have the Queros Amazonicos. This area has been threatened by agriculture, by slash and burn farming, by mining, by the Transoceanic Highway. So in a sense, the conservation concession will protect around 70,000 hectares of pristine cloud forest. The Amazon Conservation Association has already implemented a conservation concession by these areas, making these areas work for local communities. So how do you produce tangible benefits for these communities? It's a big challenge. And in that process, even though ACA is a very technical institution, and we're known for our outstanding research, it is a major challenge to work with local communities.
Working with local communities, that's where this gets really complicated because people think differently in every part of the world. Like One Sky, we work in some pretty tough places. We work in Sierra Leone. It's at the very bottom of the United Nations quality of life in terms of index. We work with people in the mining industry around diamond minings, rehabilitating areas so that people can have organic farms. I mean, it's not an easy place to work. In Nigeria, we work in Nigeria, in the Delta, where there's been conflicts around oil. It's a very, very volatile place. And here, working in Peru is equally as complex because you have these different ways that people think. Every part of the world, people think differently. And yet we also have some common values. And what we needed to do, or what our challenge is in each one of these places, is to not make assumptions about how we think and how they think, but to figure out ways in which we can understand how we both think, or how we can think, where do our values come together, and where do the solutions come that we can put those values together and meet each other, so to speak.
One Sky was invited to work with the Amazon Conservation Association given our work in Nigeria, working in buffer zones around conservation areas. One Sky has a philosophy to bridge environment and development, and so we worked a lot with communities towards conservation. And we're really interested in areas that have high biodiversity and ecological integrity, such as here in Peru, we're working near the Manu Biosphere Reserve. One Sky has always bridged environment and development. We believe you can't have conservation without working with communities and working towards development or with human rights. And vice versa, you can't work on development without taking the environment into account. And in general, we're called One Sky because we all live under one sky and we have global problems that we all need to work together towards. But we really need to marry that nexus of environment and development. And that came out 20 years ago with the Brundtland Report, when the term sustainable development was coined.
The Amazon Conservation Association looks at One Sky as a partner. How is a partner? Why is a partner? Because we see their experience in working with local communities as a fantastic opportunity to be able to, as I said before, understand the conservation of the Queros, the Andean Queros, and the Amazonian Queros.
Well, one of the things about working in really tough places like Sierra Leone or Nigeria or Peru, sitting under a tarp in the rain, is that you gotta think, you gotta philosophize, you gotta work this one out a little bit. Like, how do we value things? How do we hold perspective? What are common ways that we think on the planet? How do you think? I think. How does a person in Africa think? In South America think? Because we have to be able to understand how the human mind works and develops and moves through and evolves in terms of consciousness, if we're to be able to figure out new and creative ways to get out of this problem we're in. So a few years ago, One Sky got very interested in the work of an American philosopher named Ken Wilber. And he has what they call integral theory, which basically, very, very basically, says that we have an interior dimension. Everybody on the planet has this. You've got it, I've got it. Right now, I'm talking to you. There's this tarp. There's this whatever this plant is, and there's rain, and there's this whole outside world outside of me. I wake up in the morning and I enter this world of stuff, right? And beautiful world that it is. But I also have an inside that you don't know what I'm thinking right now, right? You don't know my interior landscape, and every morning that's as real to me as this exterior world. And that's common to every human experience. Very simple. Interior, exterior, right? Interior, exterior. Then you have another two more dimensions, which is simply that when you were born, when I was born, we were born into something. We are both a part and a whole. I am both an individual and I'm part of a collective, a we. There is a we in my reality. There's an it in my reality. In fact, I, we, and it show up in every language structure. So that's common to all human thinking. Now, why is that useful? Because basically, you divide that up into what they call 4 quadrants, and you've got yourself a really nice map.
The quadrants of integral theory can help our process around, first, recognizing that the worldview of both the Keros groups will play a really important role in any multi-stakeholder process. And secondly, it can help disclose some methodologies we can use to come into greater understanding of what those worldviews consist of. What is the world space of the Keros? And then thirdly, those methodologies can be brought to bear onto a participatory process in which we can improve communication between all the different stakeholders involved in this. The upper left quadrant refers to the individual's interior. So that includes things like what one might be aware of, what one feels, what one believes in. The upper right is the individual's exterior. So that includes such things as what one does, both in terms of actions and behaviors or in terms of physiology. And then in the lower left quadrant, we have the collective interior dimension of culture. So that includes ways that we share meaning, ways that we, the implicit social norms that guide how we live our life. The lower right quadrant includes such things as systems, such as economic systems that interface and interlock with political systems, that interface with social systems and ecological systems, that kind of thing.
And you can see that sometimes when we develop solutions or we develop ideas about how to solve a problem, we might be only thinking in one of those little quadrants. We might be thinking, okay, we got to build a house because you don't have shelter. But we don't realize that a house, the exterior world of a house, is not a home. A home, there's a whole bunch of interior dimensions to a home. You know, like if I go into a home, it's both a house and there's also this cultural stuff going on. I feel good. People welcome me. It's my house. I'm proud because the picture has aesthetic value that I put on that wall that time that I married such and such. You know, it's all got some kind of value, and values are inside of us. And they're both inside me individually and inside me collectively. So those four quadrants, if we don't pay attention to them, if we don't pay attention to one of those quadrants, then we might not come up with a good solution. And you see this problem all over the world. You see people build a school and forget culturally how people actually teach their children. You see people build a well, build a bathroom, build a house, build something, right? But they don't pay attention to the interior dimensions, the cultural dimensions of how people think. So we found this integral theory an incredible tool to be able to use when we're designing and thinking about how we think and how other people think and how this whole thing that we're in is constructed.
So, in a sense, the integral approach recognizes that these four dimensions and the perspectives they offer are co-arising or tetra-arising in every moment. And so, as you can see, each one of these four areas brings different kinds of methodologies. So we have the objective scientific method. We also have subjective experiential processes, as well as intersubjective dialogical processes. So when we look at development and conservation through this integral lens, development or conservation is seen quite differently. So no longer can development just be about economic development or infrastructure or scientific technicalities. It also has to include participation, cultural meaning, different individuals' worldviews, and in this case, the Andean cosmovision, beliefs, etc.
Let's say you come here, to the jungle and you meet an indigenous person. Somebody who's been living here forever, right? Well, they may look around and they see spiritual value, they see shelter, they see food, they see all sorts of stuff that you or I might not see. Or let's say you come here and you meet a scientist. Well, a scientist might come here and they see carbon cycles.
So in this project we also measure the root productivity, so we know how much fine roots are growing, so you can see very well the roots growing. In terms of the region, the Amazon is it's known to be a sink of carbon. by models and some studies that have been done at the basin level. But what we need to consider now is that there are a lot of disturbance in this kind of ecosystem, like deforestation and fire, that can balance this amount of carbon that is being sink. So in the end, the Amazon can be a new ecosystem where the amount of carbon that is being sink and released is zero, or even can be also a place that is releasing carbon due to disturbance.
El segundo partido es promoción con parroquia.
At one point, we sent a young guy here as an intern to work directly with the Queros.
Yeah. My name is Pablo Alvarez. I'm an intern with CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency, working for One Sky here in Peru, in the Peruvian Amazon. I'm here working with Queros community and Pilcapata, which is a community 2 hours walk from here. They have recently applied for a conservation concession, and they have approached ACA, the conservation organization in the area, and ACA is the partner of One Sky. My role here is to participate with communities and then understand them from their perspective a little bit better. So traditionally, development projects tend to look at infrastructure of some kind, and tend to come to communities and build a pump or a bathroom, and too often, the work that is done doesn't take off and doesn't take roots in the community because interior aspects of the community aren't perceived, or no attention is given to them. What we're trying to do with the conservation is we can't come to a community and expect them to have an understanding of what a conservation concession is, or what conservation is overall. They have basic needs, values, and aspirations that the organization needs to consider before actually engaging the community in conservation concession concept. So that's one of the roles that I'm here is to, as a visitor, understand the community from their perspective. I think it's an ethical approach to development concept, to development.
You know, when it comes to understanding, the people that actually live here, there are the mountain people, the closest people to where we are in the Amazon right now live in a place called Suchubamba, in Chayabamba, and they're intensely religious people, Roman Catholic with a kind of a mix of all of their cultural heritage, which can vary from village to village. In fact, when you go to the festivities, you see a tremendous amount of color and different cultural costumes and dances, and it's extremely rich culture.
Un saludo grande para Cantondino. Desde Chayabamba, los chalacos.
Este es el Cantondino. Este es Chajlandino. Este es Palandino. Chas. Chas, papay. Tu paras kama. Warmita pa mo bakari.
So those are the Quechua people, and then you have the Queros people who are living higher up in the mountains, and also the Queros people who are living in the jungle, deep in the jungle, and there's hardly any Queros people left. Very, very few that are still there. And then you have a third group of people that you could call colonizers. They're basically people who have only come in the last 30 years to be able to farm, to be able to cut wood, maybe do some mining or prospecting. These are people who are moving in from the global economy from other parts of Peru and basically colonizing the jungle.
Estos pobladores han venido hace aproximadamente 20, 25 o 30 años al Valle de Coñipata y se han dedicado durante mucho tiempo a la extracción de madera, ¿no? Cuando se agota este recurso de la madera y cada vez el recurso de explotar madera está más lejos, ya no es comercialmente viable. Entonces ellos utilizan la tierra para hacer agricultura intensiva, con unas técnicas no apropiadas. Y eso genera una deforestación y quema de bosques y en realidad están disminuyendo la biodiversidad que existe en todo este territorio que está colindante con el Parque Nacional del Manu, que está para el fondo, ¿no? Entonces, una alternativa es darle a los agricultores, por ejemplo, cultivos de esta naturaleza que le puedan brindar un beneficio económico un poco mayor, con plantaciones, con cultivos que son semiperennes o perennes. En este caso el sachainchi es un cultivo semiperenne, o sea que no dura toda la vida, pero dura aproximadamente de 8 a 10 años, ¿no? Entonces les permite al agricultor ya no empezar a quemar, a arrozar, a deforestar más tierras, sino trabajar en estos pequeños espacios de terreno, ¿no? Donde este cultivo está produciendo. Microempresas porque como existe una organización, están trabajando a nivel de empresa, ¿no? Pero muy pequeña, una asociación de empresa muy pequeña, por ahí el nombre de microempresa, ¿no? Y el apoyo de la institución es darle la asistencia técnica y enlazarlos con el mercado, ¿no? Con las empresas que están en Lima o en Cusco, ¿no? Todavía no se realiza la transformación acá, tal vez en algún momento, en alguna vez, ¿no? Pero la idea de fomentar este tipo de cultivos como otros de nuestra institución es justamente generarles un beneficio económico y que manejen un espacio de tierra y no se estén moviendo.
So the challenge for us is not just the philosophical values, human consciousness side of things, but also just the nuts and bolts practical issue of how do you pay for stuff? How do you engage economically in sustainable livelihoods? And how do you pay for conservation concessions?
One of the hardest things for people who work on conservation, sustainability, poverty reduction, sustainable livelihoods, type things, all those things. One of the hardest things for those people is to find the money to do the work. So where does a group like Amazon Conservation Association find the money to do their programs, their various programs? Well, one way is with the canopy walkway. My company, Greenheart Conservation Company, designs and builds canopy walkways that attract tourists, that spend money, it generates revenue to allow Amazon Conservation Association to be a little more self-sufficient and to be able to direct their programs independent of donor cycles and all that other stuff. So One Sky and Greenheart helped Amazon Conservation Association with the construction and the various other parts of this very complicated project. But what is a canopy walkway? A canopy walkway is a way that human beings can comfortably access the canopy of the forest, where most of the biological action is. This is where it happens. Here in the cloud forest, in the headwaters of the Amazon, there's incredible ecology up here. This is, for instance, for researchers, it provides unparalleled access to the plants and animals and the unique ecology of what's in the canopy so that they can study it. For students, which is another one of Amazon Conservation Association's objective, is to attract students where they can be educated about ecology and about conservation issues. We're in the headwaters of the Amazon right here in the cloud forest. Incredible place. One of the coolest places on Earth, highest biodiversity. So it just so happens that this canopy walkway, designed to Canadian engineering standards, is probably the most sophisticated canopy walkway in existence on the planet, and coincidentally it's in one of the coolest places on Earth. Here we are 30-40 meters above the forest floor cruising along where normally only birds can get to. We've been working with One Sky a lot, and they talk about this integral theory stuff, which to me sounds a little woohoo, but the fact of the matter is, you have to think about two things. You have to think about the design of the facility, the nuts and the bolts, the cables, the exterior, and you also have to think about the interior. Milagros comes from Suchibamba, which is a rural community in Peru. Rich culture, but not used to interacting with people from other parts of the world. So Milagros has been through a guide training program that dealt a lot with self-esteem, confidence, because the fact of the matter is, when she's a guide and people come from away, she has to be able to not only be safe, because if people act crazy and they start monkeying around in the canopy walkway, there is a possibility they could hurt themselves. Another thing though, is she has to have the self-worth in her culture actually, to be able to confidently teach people, realize they're curious and they want to know about the rich culture that she comes from.
Bueno, mi experiencia fue, venir aquí fue muy bonito, realmente muy impresionante para mí como mujer, porque trabajar aquí junto con los varones, un varón no puede pensar que una mujer puede escalar o puede trabajar con motores, no sé, tantas cosas, porque una mujer, o sea, no piensan que una mujer no lo puede hacer, entonces, pero sí, nosotros lo hemos logrado.
The partnerships between ACA, Greenheart, One Sky gave us the opportunity to put together a really comprehensive program. And so this included definitely some of the types of skills and education around this actual structure itself. So learning how to build it was a key part, and how they can then maintain it in the future. So a lot of that kind of aspect. Another piece was learning about the local ecosystem. So what types of information, ecologically speaking, would be important for a guide to know about when visitors come or when students come.
At that point, that's the area that's lacking.
Yeah.
They need way more training in actual ecology.
Luckily, though, that's the area that's lacking, and that's the area that ACA has the most awareness of, is the ecology, given it's the research station. The other piece was just becoming, in a sense, a cultural ambassador, as well as a guide for Canopy Walkway. So the quality of guiding that one, where one can actually speak about one's local culture with pride, as John was saying, to speak about which medicinal plants are used for what. That aspect of being a cultural ambassador will be a key part, was a key part of the training, and will be a key part of guides here. And then finally, some of these local people come from communities that are very isolated. It takes 4 or 5 hours on dirt, windy roads to get to the nearest major hospital. And so there's a degree of not as high, I'll put it this way, not as high a self-esteem as there would be for someone who is raised in Cusco. And so our guide training program includes quite a bit of personal self-esteem work, personal leadership. What does it mean to be an ambassador for one's local area? That question is more of a personal development question, a personal growth question, than it is learning about the technicalities of the walkway itself. So.
And I think too, when like the guide training focused on sort of self-confidence and self-image, but I think in working actual construction, because we work with these guys, these people, the men and women, and treated them with respect, that is sort of natural for us, sort of as Canadians to do. We worked as hard as they did. We didn't work from a different position of like hierarchy. We didn't say, you go do those, crappy jobs, and I'm just going to stand here with my white hat on and watch. No, we didn't do that. We worked just as hard as they did, and because of that, then we were on a very equal level, where because we treated them with respect, they saw, okay, well, these guys are, gringos from Canada, and they're just like us. We're all the same. So when we play checkers at lunch, and when we live with the people and work with them, I think that's a really key part of helping to build their self-confidence and their ability to relate to people from away, strangers. Talking about real experiences, just the other day, we were at a fiesta for 3 days in Chayabamba, and I was a padrino de los Mejeños.
Dile por no dar fuerte. If you don't hit him
And Gail,
we were given the responsibility to raise money for this party, and the whole party is a 3-day festival in honor of La Virgen de Chanca, which is a local deity in that area. And so we carried back this icon of La Virgen de Chanca to Canada and raised money all year to put the festival on this year. And it was quite an example of how community trust is one of the primary foundations upon which our work in this area with Canopy Walkway, with community development, with environmental conservation, the foundation rests on community trust. And having John as a Mejeño, myself as someone who's, carrying the Virgin back to Canada and bringing back enough money to host the festival, that's one way we've managed to be connecting strongly with the community for this type of work.
and there was a lot of beer.
So, are we saving the Amazon rainforest? Are poor people getting out of poverty? All these questions. I think so far so good with this project. But the bottom line is that we absolutely have to get more people involved. We need more support, more money, more finances, resources, smart people, good ideas. All this canopy walkways, conservation concessions, legal instruments, carbon financing, all of those are great. And we need philosophies, new ways of approaching the problem. That's all great. We need that. And we need more of it, and we need it right now because we're in this crunch period on the planet in terms of problems. And so we've got to encourage each other, really encourage each other, no matter how hard it is or wet it is or whatever. We've got to just keep going, struggling, and evolve our way out of this one.